Scott Grayson's been in Minnesota all week long. 97.3 ESPN.com Eagles reporter. Of course, he joins us via the Boardwalk Honda hotline, and he just stepped out of Roger Goodell State of the Union address. Scott, how you doing?
Doing okay, Josh. How you doing?
Doing well. So I want to get your initial impression of Goodell. What has he said that has stood out to you so far today?
Well, the biggest thing that I think he hit on, well, I'd give you the two biggest ones to me. Of course, everybody's talking about the catch, no catch rule, and he's talking about how they're going to address that. And rather than try to work on the rule that's in existence, he said they want to kind of scrap it all and just start from the beginning of what is a catch. So it'll be interesting to see how that pans out. They spent about an hour and a half, he said, with some Hall of Fame receivers and tried to get their perspective as they watched different catches. What did you think? Is this a catch? Is it not a catch? Why? Why not? And he said you have guys like Chris Carter who come from the old school area of things where it's, hey, you get up, you give the ball to the referee, and that is in fact a catch. And if you don't, then it's not a catch. So they've got a long way to go to figure out how to, get that rule accurately written so the officials can then accurately impose it and rule on it. Now, outside of that, I thought the biggest thing he's discussing is really about the parity of the league and just how quickly you can turn a season around. He highlighted the Eagles as being a team that's done that. He said the Eagles are a great example of how quickly things can change in the NFL. And he pointed at the fact that 8 teams in the playoffs this year were not in the playoffs a year ago. So, he's given this, state of the NFL, and he's basically saying the state of the NFL is good. And there's, of course, a lot of talk about Thursday Night Football, the new package that was put out that Fox picked up. And he, was asked about injuries and said that, look, players may complain about having to play on Thursday night, but he said they're all excited when the game's over for that extra long break they get on the other side of it. So, it sounds like they're kind of taking the good with the bad at this point.
Goodell has mentioned in previous interviews, Scott, that he wants to see the preseason cut down at least by one game. He's willing to talk about an extra bye week. So with that in mind, do you think, based on what you're hearing him say today, that Goodell is really that open to really modifying the schedule that much to maybe almost compromise the players a little bit?
I think he wants to get towards that direction, but the biggest thing you got to worry about when you're talking about a beast as big as the NFL is how do you implement all of that? So he said the competition committee is meeting for the first time next week, and they'll start talking about, all things related to, the competition side of things, and of course the catch, no catch rule being part of that. But in terms of modifying the schedule, I think that that's something, my hunch is, my gut feeling is that that's something in this contract that he's working on right now, that he just signed, a few months ago, is something that I think I could see him really trying to make his goal to get to that point that you highlighted. Maybe one less preseason game, maybe an extra bye week mixed in. So we'll see if he gets there. He's not talking about that too much here today. But I think that could be something they strive towards in the future.
What were some of the other points that Goodell brought up while he was giving his, for lack of a better term, his monologue up there?
Well, he was asked about the Rooney Rule as it related to the Raiders. Said that the league investigated that and that they found that the Raiders were credibly interested in some of the minority candidates they discussed with or talked to before hiring John Gruden. There's been several questions about games in Mexico from some Mexican reporters that are here. They're definitely going back there, but they haven't given out any details yet, and likely won't until they get closer to scheduling things in April. But I think the biggest overwhelming message he's trying to hit on here is just how exciting the league is from the standpoint of parity. And he did talk about touchdown celebrations and how he and Troy Vincent particularly spent some time trying to implement that rule in time with teams throughout the season back in the spring when they had their workouts then to talk to players about here's what we're thinking, here's what we're envisioning. We want you guys to get to show off your creativity, but you got to do it within reason. And he talked about how much of a success that has been. And we know the Eagles have had some good celebrations mixed in there and have truly taken heart to that rule.
Scott, you mentioned the dancing and then relaxing that rule real quick before we move on to the Eagles themselves. I noticed that Goodell, he's going without the tie, the open collar with the jacket on. It seems like he has been trying, at least this week in interviews, and what I'm seeing of his body language on the stage, he's really seemed like he's trying to almost modify the image of the NFL a little bit in himself to the public.
Yeah, I could go along with that. I mean, he's definitely trying to look more relaxed, and I think not seem so uptight. And I think there is the image side of that. I mean, he's been criticized by players. He's been under the gun, in the past year, for sure, if not more, for different decisions that they've had to deal with at the league office. Ezekiel Elliott being one of them. I mean, there's a lot of things they've had to deal with, and I think he's trying to lose some of that perception of, you talk about how much of a difference does it make not having the tie on and having the cuffs rolled up, and it brings you down to earth a little bit more. It doesn't make you look like you are the authority at times. And I think perhaps you're right. I think perhaps he's trying to work on some of that image.
Scott, being around the team all week, Doug Peterson and the players, how are they handling Super Bowl week? All the extracurricular activities that go on and the parties and, everybody just being excited to be at that type of venue. How are the players as far as the game? Are they focused? Are they ready? Do they look like that they know that they have one more game to win?
Yeah, honestly, Deshaun, they've handled this a lot better than I expected them to. They certainly are not shying away from what is all the extracurricular activities you have here at the Super Bowl, but they're having fun at the same time. And like this team has done so many times this year, they've found a way to handle the highs and the lows without getting too high or too low and staying somewhat in the middle. And I think they've done that. They're having fun. They enjoyed, look, Fletcher Cox, I tweeted out a picture today, had a mask on, like an Eagles mask on, and did a lot of his interviews with it on, quite frankly. And you look, they're having fun. I mean, they're having fun, but at the same token, and not just Fletch, a lot of them were saying, we are hitting the practice field today, and this is when it really begins in earnest. It's time for us to start, notching it up a little bit as we get ready for focusing in on this game. And they understand when it's okay to let loose, and they understand when it's time to buckle down. And, there's been a lot of talk of it, but I think that stems from head coach Doug Peterson. He really has done a great job of getting these guys to understand where they are, what the moment is, and where they're trying to get to. And to that extent, I mean, we learned today that Brett Favre is going to address the team. Doug Peterson asked him to speak to the team on Saturday morning, and so he's going to spend some time with them. And there's a lot of excitement in the guys being able to hear what Brett Favre has to say, what kind of advice he might be able to give them. Brandon Graham talked about how, he doesn't want to be stuck in his hotel room all the time. So he's going for walks around the mall here and actually ran into some of the New England Patriots while he was out and about and just said it made him want to just put the pads on and get the game going right then and there in the mall. So, they're characters. They're enjoying themselves. They definitely are finding the way to balance. And this is what I've been impressed with, balancing the fun with the seriousness of what this moment could be for, all their legacies.
Yeah, exactly. And kind of to piggyback off of what you just said about Doug Peterson, I mean, all week, the media have been trying to find a storyline, and it's become Doug Peterson, the guy that is he's a player's guy. He talks, he wants to have fun with the media, and they got Bill Belichick, a guy that's kind of like, we're just focused on this, we're just focused on that. Do you buy into all that it's kind of two different type of feels going into the game and it can make a difference? Because to me, it's really it's the Eagles versus the Patriots, two good football teams that are going to put on a show on Sunday night.
Yeah, it truly is. And I mean, the players understand that. The coaches only do so much. However, they do, a big part of what you end up seeing in the game on Sunday. But you do have two very different coaches here. Look, you got one guy, and I wrote about this in terms of analytics. You have one guy in Doug Peterson who utilizes his analytics department to a certain extent. He's not jumping off any deep end or anything like that in terms of diving full-fledged into the analytics, but it helps drive some of the decisions that he makes. Bill Belichick, on the other hand, could care less about analytics, doesn't want anything to do with them, quite frankly, when I asked him about that. So, but you have kind of the old school coach. You have a guy who is young in the league as a head coach, just his second year. He listens to his players an awful lot. He has a leadership council, which consists of 9 players. 5 of them, I believe, are on IR. But he listens to those players every week, and it matters to him. Not to say that Bill Belichick doesn't listen to his players, but it's not the same. So you do definitely have two different head coaches here. And, I wonder, depending on how everything goes with this game on Sunday, could we all look back at this Super Bowl as being maybe a time when the baton got passed because, look, the Eagles, I think, are set to with Carson Wentz and Doug Peterson to be perhaps successful. Certainly what Belichick and Brady have done is unimaginable and likely won't be duplicated. But might they find some success in a similar way? Who knows?
We're talking with Scott Grayson, who's live from Minnesota for this week's Super Bowl matchup between the Eagles and Patriots. Scott, real quick, when I really look at this game, I keep saying that, listen, the Eagles want to have a chance on defense. Yes, they have to get pressure on Brady, but you got to cover those backs out of the backfield because that seems to be Brady's bread and butter, especially earlier in the game. I mean, every single piece of film that I watch on the Patriots, they're getting those running backs involved through the passing game, which puts more pressure on the linebackers like Nigel Bradham, Michael Kendricks, et cetera. Do you agree?
Oh, absolutely. It certainly does. And, it's funny because one of the biggest reasons for the Eagles' success this season, when you look at it, is they've been really good at making teams one-dimensional. They stop the run. Now, the offense has helped at times in putting points on, and suddenly you look up and the opponent is down by multiple scores, so they have to pass. But the Eagles have done a great job in controlling the run out of their opponent, forcing them to pass. But, talking to some of the players this week, they say that's all well and good, but against this team, that means you're putting the ball in Brady's hands even more. So they know they have to be on their P's and Q's for 60 minutes. They know they have to be ready for anything that the Patriots will try to do to be able to, get plays that are similar to runs. And like you stated, they're going to get the ball in the running back's hands, get it out of Tom's hands quickly because, everybody knows the way you beat Brady is you come up the middle and you hit him in the mouth. And certainly the Eagles are going to try to do that, and Brady's going to be ready for it. But to combat that, you have to get the ball out of his hands quickly. And I think we will see the Patriots do a lot of that, particularly early in the game.
Scott Grayson live in Minnesota here on 97.3 ESPN. Been checking in all week from the great north. And Scott will be live with Mike Gill tomorrow on Radio Row as the Sports Bash will be live in Minnesota at the Mall of America. Scott Grayson, Mike Gill tomorrow on 97.3 ESPN. Scott, appreciate the time today, and keep up the great work, man. We see you're just running everywhere, keeping tracks of everything.
Yeah, thanks, Scott.
Oh, thank you. I appreciate that. I'm trying.
Well, you're doing a good job at it. Scott Grayson on the Boardwalk Honda Hotline on 97.3 ESPN.